This morning, a first-of-its-kind decision by the Alabama Supreme Court that could put families' access to fertility treatments in the post-Roe era at risk, determining frozen embryos qualify as people under its state law, ruling unborn children are children without exception based on developmental stage.
The U.S. is definitely starting to become a terrifying place for women. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it was only a matter of time before conservative states took it into their own hands to try to control women as much as possible and, in turn, the population in general. Also, before we get started, the CDC has listed some of the common complications of pregnancy as anemia, diabetes, heart disease, including coronary artery disease and heart attack, high blood pressure, infection, hyperemesis gravidarum, as well as mental conditions including anxiety and depression. Childbirth complications for the mother can also include preeclampsia, uterine rupture, amniotic fluid embolism, infection, sepsis, blood clots, hemorrhaging, potential need for blood transfusions, anesthesia complications. And with 32.9 deaths per every 100,000 births, death is also a possibility. Unless, of course, you're a Black woman. In that case, you're actually more than twice as likely to die in childbirth, with 69.9 deaths per every 100,000 live births, which ranks the US as worst in the world amongst high-income countries for maternal death. Now, let's discuss the risks of being a live kidney donor. Pain, infection at the incision site, incisional hernia, pneumonia, blood clots, hemorrhaging, potential need for blood transfusions, anesthesia complications, and death. Though according to the National Kidney Registry, the mortality rate is 7 deaths per every 100,000 living donor surgeries. Funny enough, the CDC and other sources don't list pain as a potential complication of pregnancy or delivery. Weird. Basically, my point is, if you think that you have the right to say that women should be forced to keep an unwanted pregnancy and endure the risks associated with pregnancy and delivery because you insist on a woman giving up the use of her body for an unborn fetus, then you should sign up to be a living kidney donor with the full intent, if called upon, to put your own life at risk for a living person.
But my body will never be the same after giving up a kidney.
Neither will a woman's be after childbirth. And that's if she didn't suffer any complications, including postpartum ones such as bladder or uterine prolapse. So if you're unwilling to put your own life on the line, you have zero right to say anything with regards to what a woman does for her own health and well-being. Or, in more basic terms, you can take your pro-life argument and shove it. Now, where were we? How does limiting women's access to abortion affect the rest of the population? Take an average middle-class couple who have the expectation of being able to wait to have kids. The median household income in the US is $74,580 according to the US Census Bureau. That's likely before taxes, but for the sake of trying to give this couple the best chance possible, I'm gonna say it's after taxes. The average national rent price in the United States is $1,372 according to August 2023 rental market data from apartmentlist.com. $74,580 divided by 12 months is $6,215. And that's household income, which could be a single person supporting a family or 2 people working to support the family. In this case, we're going to say that's the joint income of 2 people. Taking out rent, that leaves $4,843. According to Forbes, the average utility cost is $429.33 per month.
Yeah, buddy!
Let's say the couple spend $100 each per week on food, so that's $800. They both own a car with not too far commutes, so let's say $50 each per week for gas, so another $400 a month. Car insurance is $100 each, so that's $200. Each of their phones is $60 a month, so that's $120. So far, that leaves them with $2,893.67. And yes, I am well aware I am being very generous with a lot of these numbers. So let's start throwing in some reality. Almost half of Americans have student loan debt, with an average paying $503 a month. So let's give our couple one student loan repayment. Almost half of credit card holders have credit debt. So let's give our couple a $250 per month payment. Let's be very kind with healthcare costs and put them at $300 a month for health insurance for the couple. Let's also allot them each $100 per week for miscellaneous items such as clothes, hygiene products, and other household items. This comes to $800 a month. Now we're at $1,040.67. That seems pretty good, right? And that's also assuming that the couple are in perfect health, who never have any accidents, have perfect cars that never need oil changes or new tires or registrations, and basically living in a state of suspended animation where inflation and the overall global economy can in no way affect them, and thus they are saving $1,000 per month to be able to buy their own home and use the leftover $40.67 on the occasional coffee and avocado toast. Too bad the average cost of a house in the US is $417,700. According to the National Association of Realtors, the average first-time home buyer will put down a 6% down payment, which in this case would be $25,062. Okay, great. our average couple will only need a little over 2 years to be able to save up a down payment for a house. Again, I know this is in no way realistic, but these idiots making these laws think this is how it works, so this is what we're gonna go with. Just bear with me, because now we're gonna throw in an unexpected pregnancy. The average out-of-pocket cost of pregnancy care with insurance is $6,940, and for delivery is $2,854. But that number can change depending on if it's a vaginal or cesarean birth. That's $9,794 for the entire pregnancy, barring any complications, or an average of $1,088 per month for 9 months. Well, that's the couple's entire savings, plus coffee and avocado toast, plus an additional $47.33 per month. Well, the couple had been saving for a few months, so they'll just pull that little bit extra out of their savings account. Baby is born, and the couple have incredible friends and family who got them all of the baby clothes, crib, car seats, strollers, and basically fully covered the $1,000 minimum that most new parents spend on supplies for their first baby. But now they have a baby. In 2015, the USDA did a study which found that the cost of a child from birth to age 17 was $233,610. Broken down, that's $13,742 per year, or $1,145 per month. That $1,040.67 for savings in avocado toast isn't looking so good now, is it? And this is all assuming that there were 0 complications during pregnancy or childbirth and that the kid was born completely healthy, which we all know is not always the case. The Family and Medical Leave Act, or FMLA, allows for parents to have 12 weeks of unpaid leave following the birth of a child as long as they work for a company with 50 or more employees. But unless you work for a company that already has something in place, there is no required maternal or paternal leave by the United States federal government. To put that into comparison, the countries with the best maternity leave in the world are Greece, Slovakia, Poland, Luxembourg, and the best being Estonia, which gives new mothers up to 86 weeks of leave, with 20 of those weeks being paid at 100% the employee's salary. And the worst countries in the world for maternity leave are Papua New Guinea and the good old United States of America, with 0 federally mandated maternity leave. The so-called greatest country in the fucking world. So what does our average couple do now? They weren't ready for a baby, didn't have enough saved up to buy a house big enough for their family, or enough saved up for mom to be able to stay home with that baby. She has to go back to work and therefore can't breastfeed because even though the PUMP Act, Providing Urgent Maternal Protections for Nursing Mothers Act, was signed into law in December of 2022 to protect working mothers and give them the right to pump during work hours in a private area provided by her employer, she is the 1 in 4 women who are not entitled to overtime pay. And because the PUMP Act was placed in the provision of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which sets overtime, her employer is not required by law to provide her with the time and space for her to express breast milk. So she has to stop breastfeeding her baby. An employer like this also has no set maternity leave for their employees, so after the 12 weeks afforded to her by the FMLA, she has to go back to work or risk losing her job. Because those 12 weeks were unpaid, and I'm hoping with all of my feminist heart that her and her husband are making equal amounts of money, that is a loss of $8,604 on income, and now an increase of $400 to $800 a month for formula. Do you see where I'm going with this? Having children before you're ready can be devastating, not just financially, but mentally and emotionally as well. All of your plans for the future are gone, and there's a chance you will never get to have the life you dreamed of. Or at the very least, it's going to be much harder to get there than before. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it is a lot harder. And this is a married couple who are both employed. What if it's a couple where one partner has a disability and can't work full-time? Or they make less than the median household average? Or they're unmarried and the man takes off because he can? It's not so easy for a pregnant woman to do the same. Or what if it's a teenager who's going to get thrown out of her house as soon as her parents find out that she's pregnant? Or what if it's a college student living in a dorm with her best friend in a country where an abortion can end in your imprisonment? And you'd think I was talking about the current state of the US, wouldn't you? But I'm actually talking about a film set in 1987 communist Romania called 4 Months, 3 Weeks, and 2 Days. Because apparently the land of the free has regressed to the overthrown 36-year-old policies of a communist regime. Nicolae Ceausescu was the general secretary of the Romanian Communist Party from 1965 to 1989 and the second and last communist leader of Romania. I hate pronouncing his name, and he is a disgusting, terrible human being who looks like the personification of a penis, so from now on I will be referring to him as Dickhead. He was widely seen as a dictator and overthrown and executed in the Romanian Revolution in December of 1989, but before this his cult of personality was unprecedented. A cult of personality, or a cult of a leader, is defined as the result of an effort which is made to create an idealized and heroic image of a glorious leader, often through unquestioning flattery and praise. Historically, it has developed through techniques of mass media, propaganda, spectacle, the arts, patriotism, and government-organized demonstrations and rallies. A cult of personality is similar to apotheosis, meaning the glorification of a subject to divine levels and, commonly, the treatment of a human being, any other living thing, or an abstract idea in the likeness of a deity, except that it is established by modern social engineering techniques, usually by the state or the party in one-party states and dominant party states. Cults of personality often accompany the leaders of totalitarian or authoritarian governments.
We have too many people now in the Republican Party who are not taking their responsibility seriously and who have pledged their allegiance and loyalty to Donald Trump. I mean, it is fundamentally antithetical. It is contrary to everything conservatives believe to embrace a personality cult. And yet, that is what so many in my party are doing today.
Is the Republican Party a personality cult?
I think that large segments of it have certainly become that.
A cult?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is absolutely a cult of personality around Donald Trump.
Like the Soviets had the KGB, Dickhead had his own secret police called the Securitate, who were responsible for mass surveillance and severe repression and human rights abuses within the country. But the most egregious act of his rule was Decree 770, which criminalized abortion except in the following cases. Women over 45, lowered to 40 in 1974 and raised back up to 45 in 1985. Women who have already delivered and reared 4 children, raised to 5 in 1985. Women whose life would be threatened by carrying to term due to medical complications. Women whose fetuses were malformed, and women who were pregnant through rape or incest.
Republican Representative David Barrero introduced House Bill 1519 that says, quote, a person or an entity may not purposely perform or attempt to perform an abortion except to save the life of a pregnant woman in a medical emergency. Right now, Florida bans most abortions after 15 weeks, but takes into exception victims of rape and incest. This bill would take away that exception.
Up until this point, 80% of pregnancies ended in abortion, and that was mainly due to the fact that there was very little effective contraception available to the people at that time. Now, unlike in the US, religion, or the excuse of religion, had nothing to do with this decree. It was all about increasing the population of Romania. And there was a sharp uptick in births from 1966 to 1967, but that number fell back to the pre-decree 770 numbers in 1983, most likely because women figured out how to obtain abortions illegally, even though it was incredibly dangerous due to both the imprisonment that they would receive if caught and the possibility of infection or death from the procedure. In fact, over 9,000 women lost their lives due to complications from these back alley abortions. So why would they do it? Remember that big math problem we did at the beginning with the average couple from the US? Well, in the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s, Romania's economy was growing rapidly, but due to mismanagement and bad policies by Dickhead, everything got bad very quickly. Forcing women to carry unwanted pregnancies meant a huge increase in the population with no public services to help carry that weight. Homes and classrooms were soon overcrowded, poverty increased, and many children ended up in orphanages where they were often neglected and abused simply because their parents couldn't afford to raise them. Some of these abandoned children were even purposefully given AIDS-infected blood transfusions or illegally trafficked internationally through adoption. Almost like when you have a bunch of unwanted kids dumped into a system that can't take care of them, bad shit happens to them. Even with the state's rhetoric of insisting that motherhood was the meaning of women's lives, they did very little to help said mothers once they had the children. Dick had promoted the ideal superwoman, a mother who worked, was involved in politics, and handled all of the child rearing and household duties by herself. There was no promotion of men having any responsibility with raising children or household chores, and very little of the promised assistance from the government to help with raising all of those children. Married single mother, anyone? And even with this state of ideal of women being the key to building the Romanian country, with mothers having more than 5 children, the required number, seen as having gone above and beyond the call of duty and assigned official decorations and titles, women in reality were being treated subhuman. Single women over the age of 25 were required to undergo mandatory gynecological examinations to ensure reproductive health and pay fines for not yet having had a child. In 1977, that changed to all persons who were 25 and child-free regardless of marital status and were fined from their wages, the amount depending on the sector where they worked. These became even more aggressive in 1984 after Dick had realized that his policies hadn't worked out as planned, and women of reproductive age were forced to undergo regular gynecological exams at their place of employment. If a pregnancy was detected, it was followed until birth, and miscarriages were closely investigated. Taxes increased for people without children and now included those who were unmarried, with harsh policies for unmarried people which included poor housing and being labeled as unfit citizens. Dickhead was also promoting getting married young, like as soon as you were done with school young, and divorce was very hard to get. And if you're asking, why didn't people just use contraceptives? because there weren't any. Contraception was completely unavailable in the country and only able to be obtained through the black market. Sex education was degraded down to the benefits and care of children and the consequences of abortion, because women were seen as nothing more than baby-making machines. All of this is clearly seen in the film, and I applaud filmmaker Christian Monjou, who he himself is a decretal, or a child born in the time of Decree 770, for this terrifyingly honest portrayal of what life was like for women in this time in Romania. From start to finish, we see pregnant Gabita and her friend Otilia not only planning what they'll need for the abortion, but how all of the laws in this country control every aspect of their lives. Starting with the women in the dorms trading contraceptives they obtained on the black market and discussing their forced gynecological exams, to Otilia and Gabita being so desperate for the abortion that they both agree to have sex with the abortionist when they end up not having enough money to pay for the procedure, an act which they are both disgusted by but do anyway due to the hopelessness of their situation. Afterwards, they discuss different women they know who've undergone abortions and who they went to for the procedure, regretting that they hadn't gone with a female abortionist. Later, Otilia is with her boyfriend discussing the situation, and it is very clear he does not understand how the risk of pregnancy affects women and how it is a subject that he rarely thinks about. He is against abortion but doesn't respect Otilia's fears of getting pregnant, nor has any idea of what she and Gabita and many other women are willing to endure to end an unwanted pregnancy. The same is what we're seeing here in the States since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And if you're saying, well, we still have contraception here in the States, yeah, for how much longer? The Supreme Court has made it very clear that they have no trouble overturning past cases, and it is here we come to the Comstock laws. The Comstock laws were a set of federal acts passed by the United States Congress in 1873. The act was for the suppression of trade in and circulation of obscene literature and articles of immoral use, and criminalized any use of the U.S. Postal Service to send any of the following items: obscenity, contraceptives, abortifacients, sex toys, personal letters with any sexual content or information regarding the above items. In 1965, the Supreme Court case Gridwell v. Connecticut allowed married couples access to contraception, and the 1972 Eisenstadt v. Bard case allowed contraceptions for unmarried people as well. While court cases have overturned much of the Comstock Act, it was never fully repealed by Congress, and anti-abortion groups are attempting to use the over 150-year-old act to overturn the FDA's decades-old approval of the abortion pill mifepristone. So how long before the previous cases get thrown out as well? I mean, there's already talk of them getting rid of no-fault divorce. What if they go after the Equal Credit Opportunities Act, which gives women the right to control their own finances? Or Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which protects women from discrimination in employment? Or the 19th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which gave women the right to vote? If you can look at all of this and say, there's no way that can happen, you need to wake up. Because it's happening.
In our politics lead, get this, a congressional candidate supported by Donald Trump, by the way, whose past writings and associations indicate that he is against women voting. We're talking about John Gibbs. You might remember him because with some financial support from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee with ads, which thought he would be an easier candidate for their Democratic nominee to beat, he defeated Republican Congressman Peter Meijer in this year's Michigan primary. Meijer, of course, voted to impeach Donald Trump.
Gibbs is a former Trump administration official who in the early 2000s ran this think tank called the Society for the Critique of Feminism. And it basically argued several things, one of which was that the U.S. has greatly suffered from women having the right to vote, that women did not possess, the necessary qualities to govern, and that women should not be allowed to be in the workplace, basically. He also praised an organization that was actively trying to repeal the 19th Amendment. His own website that he maintained called this organization great. He even wrote them an email that they then posted on their website in the early 2000s that said, "You have my support."
Happy International Women's Day.